Roma, Roma, Gaga, ooh la la, what's your bad romance?
Hello, it is Glamru Al Khalifa Al Hayati Lajanin here, and I'm here with Saif Abdel Salam, who is the director of my One Queen show, Glamru from Quran to Queen. My mother says I'm the greatest love. My mother is the greatest love of my life, and also the person who has made me not want to live it. My parents say I'm their greatest pride and their deepest disappointment. We started working together about a year ago to develop the show, which was initially sort of based off my memoir, Life as a Unicorn, A Journey from Shame to Pride and Everything in Between, plug HarperCollins UK and US. And that is a memoir looking at essentially someone, myself, wearing loads of different identities to try and find one that fits. So going from trying to be Muslim at the start to essentially trying to be a British aristocrat at one point, and then drag and looking for an identity that encapsulates being a queer Muslim. And so that was the challenge that I brought Saif. When I came to you, the show was like nothing, right?
Yeah, I think when we first sat down and spoke about it, it was just like this concept that you had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while to get to let's sit down and write this kind of thing.
The kind of rough idea was the show was that it was going to be a kind of rom-com between me and Allah. I would be singing to him the whole time, whether it would be Let's Get Back Together songs or breakup songs,
right,
or I'm Cheating on You with Jesus songs. But that's obviously quite a boring trope if the whole show is around that.
It was a good starting point though. We started there. And I think you sort of went away and kept writing certain sections, and then we looked at it together.
Did you have any reservations about dramatizing Allah?
No, it's interesting because for me it's because I'm not diaspora, and I only moved here a couple of seconds ago. Here, a lot of my friends, Arab and Muslim, and both, they always have particular reservations about how you speak about the religion, and how you speak about Allah, and how you speak about all of these different things, because they think that some of it might perpetuate problems and yada yada yada. But for me, I'm just not. I don't see it that way. In the same way that we were just talking about this track with Hadith in Rihanna's show, and a lot of Muslim Twitter was no, and this is so offensive, and for me it's there shouldn't be any offense in any of what you're saying, because you're just living your truth really, and you're telling it like it is, and it's your individual experience. And just because it's your individual experience, even if I personally, as Saif, would find that bits of it was offensive, it shouldn't have to affect me, because it's about you and it's about what you want to do with it.
I think one of my favourite bits about drag is the 1 to 2 hours before of getting ready. It genuinely feels like prayer.
It is definitely has to be meditative, that's for sure.
It's you, the makeup, nobody else. And actually, back in the day when bad stuff I had an assault and all that, the next day I just had the urge to get into makeup, because it's self-care, and you're deciding how your reality for the day. I was so nervous initially writing it, because I was so nervous about audience reaction, whether by making Allah a lover in the show who I'm constantly sleeping with, or there's that scene where I sing Bad Romance and it becomes the call to prayer. When it comes, I was a bit like, oh God, a Muslim's going to find this offensive, or a white liberal's going to find this too transgressive and walk out, or are some potentially racist people going to see, because the early section of the show is definitely looking at Allah as an abuser. But I kind of feel like I had to dispense with all that kind of thinking, because otherwise it would just be a really sanitized show.
Right.
And I think the show, for when people watch it, and I hope it's the same for the book, is everything's up for critique.
Exactly.
Parts of religion, but parts of religion are great.
Yeah.
And in the show there is a lovely bit about Sufism and how, and kind of the Western world has good bits and difficult bits as well, and that kind of complexity is important, and I feel like in so many queer Arab narratives you need a villain and a good person, and usually in Western narratives of the Arab world it's like Islam is quite evil and then you come to the West and the West is the hero.
Exactly.
And with this show we were trying to never have a hero or a villain.
Totally.
You know, I guess I'm just conscious that like so much of the audiences in the UK are white and liberal. Like, was that something that you were thinking about when we were putting the show together? Because it is very confrontational.
Of course, and I think we did work on that in the script, that, you know, towards like, I think it was like the second half of the show where we were looking at the ways in which we can make sure that like everything that you were saying in the beginning isn't, you know, a
The whole
green
truth.
Yeah, and the whole truth, and it isn't like a green card for everyone to just like leave the show and be like, oh, now I know why queer people suffer because of being Muslim and Arab. Well, rather what you did is like, well, actually it's got a lot to do with you, and it's got a lot to do with the history, and it's also got a lot to do with like the people who interpreted these bits of the Quran and religion that made us end up being here.
Yeah, I guess like there was a performance I did like a few years ago, and definitely it was in Edinburgh, and the audience was like 95% white at the time. And back then, when I hadn't done as much thinking around Islam and why parts of it are so patriarchal because of colonialism, the audience would live for it if there was this trope of, look at this traumatized queer person on stage who suffered because of Allah, and we, the liberal audience, can stand up and be their savior. Halfway to the point where like they go, oh wow, like this person suffered so much in Muslim countries, welcome to the West. And then people think that's the end point, and then going, well,
here's another
this is
side
what the
of
West did to us to cause us to be this way.
Exactly, and I think it's
I was
also
nervous about it. I was nervous about the fact that that doesn't happen till halfway in the show, because I was like, if anyone does leave, they might leave Islamophobic.
Right.
That was like my biggest fear.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I get why that fear exists, but I think that's just the nature of live performance anyway. I've been to a lot of shows where like personally I'm sat in the audience and I'm watching something and like someone on my right found it super offensive and they had to walk out, where I haven't. So like if that happens, it won't be the first time or like the first show that something like that does happen. And I also think just on that is the fact that while we did talk about legacy of colonialism and, you know, the essential importing of homophobia into the Middle East and North Africa, the idea of the West being this like sort of queer-friendly haven has a lot to do with pinkwashing and all of that, like other things, you know. So it's, but I think that this particular point wasn't as relevant to the show than the one that basically says this is because of you. And rather than like, well, let me tell you why you are also homophobic.
I'm gonna read.
I don't know, I feel like a drag queen's makeup box is like a toolkit, isn't it? It's literally like weaponry. What are you gonna do, bitch? That's what I feel like.
Stab you with my lips.
But it is armor. It's literally. Also, what I love about when you're in makeup, it's like if some like bullies want to be like, "You're so gay," it's like, duh.
Yeah.
Something that like I think about all the time, whether it's in my screenwriting or the book or whatever, is I'm trying to tell this story and a queer Arab story, and it's being consumed in the West. I hope that Arabs and Muslims do come to the show, and they do. And, you know, but you know, the episode that I wrote for Little America was banned in every Muslim country. You know, so there's this double-edged kind of responsibility of like, I want to do this as authentically as possible, so that other queer Arabs feel that their experience is honestly represented. But you're also trying to do the counter narrative so that Western spaces it doesn't feed their own idea of what they think is going on. So
totally.
It's a lot to think about for a show. And I felt this so much with this one of, you know, looking at a lot of, you know, some of the really dark stuff of religious oppression and the fear of hell and some of the abuse with my family. But I guess if you start worrying about how people will react, like art shouldn't be about that. It's about being authentic and people can just feel something.
Totally.
But that's been my biggest nerve. And I mean, I know you've always had a go in the rehearsals, but in a dark moment, I'll often try and just tell a joke. And
Yeah.
I think that's because I was trained with right audiences.
Of course.
Just get them to laugh so they don't feel too bad.
Right.
about this.
Yeah.
And I need to get that out of me.
I mean, we're working on it. You'll
Yeah.
get there for sure. You're almost there. And I think, on that topic, personally for me, the reason why I like to make theatre and work with people like you is I just like to tell the truth. And I'm not here to make sure that everyone's comfortable and everyone's happy. I'm definitely not saying that like, ooh, I want to make work to make everyone uncomfortable. And my mission is not to make you uncomfortable, but it's definitely also not to make you comfortable. Like, I'm not here to just be like, oh, are you okay with this? Is this not going to offend you? Are you?
I would ask that the whole first week of rehearsal.
You know?
Would this upset this so.
When I direct any piece of work, whether it's with you or someone I've worked in the past, I read the script and I was like, there's a lot of truth to this and I want to do this because of that. Not like, oh, well, I think there might be some problematic bits that would make people shake up a bit. If it does, it does. It's art at the end of the day, and not everyone is destined to like
If
it.
it's offensive and inauthentic, then it's a problem.
Of course.
It is literally the show is every line is true.
Exactly. I mean, there's a huge difference between being offended and being uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah.
Offense is just like a really personal thing, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm also like not entirely like careful for, but also I shouldn't really offend people. But it's not.
But like if you intentionally offend by going, I'm going to make fun of you, that's different.
Yeah,
But it's like being honest.
because it's your experience,
Yeah.
and that's what I mean by telling the truth.
Yeah.
Everything that you've mentioned in the show, while it might have made some people uncomfortable, it hasn't made them uncomfortable because it exists. It's made them uncomfortable because it's true.
You know, you're taking, I think it's all about agency makeup. That's what I really hate when I read stuff that's like, you know, fashion is, and makeup is so superficial. Like it can be, but also for queer people, it's like one of the main ways to express yourself in a society that tells you to be one way. Like, if I didn't have it, how would I be able to express myself? You know? And I think queer people are always responding to really difficult circumstances with joy.
Right.
And I don't know, I just feel so much autonomy, like with makeup. It's like no one can tell me how to look today. I feel like the show is an actualization of that. But when people come to see it, I find that quite scary as a performer. Like when I'm backstage, and it's like all I'm going to do for an hour. Bear in mind, you know, we've written some bits up, and there's a lot of comedy and singing and theatrics. But it's like me just talking honestly for an hour is going to make so many people uncomfortable, and that feels quite scary because it's like my life actually isn't controversial, but the society in which we all happily live in means that everything I'm going to say now is controversial. There's also a power in that, like
Totally.
like in the show, there's a power of like you. I feel like when audiences are uncomfortable, they become so present because they feel like, well, I can't look away now because, and I hate passive theatre.
Right.
You're just like, you know, another production of The Seagull, and you're just like lying, you know, and you don't feel alive at all.
Yeah.
Because that's the difference between theatre and film or TV.
Totally.
You need to
It's
feel
present.
there.
Yeah. It's like it's the being in the same space with other people and sharing a story, sharing a performance, sharing a part of you, and just being really honest about it. And I think, to be honest, like even honesty, I mean, there's not much sort of acting or character embodiment involved in what you do. But also, like, if you think about it, like, good acting is just about, like, just telling the truth. Yeah, being honest, and just, like, just be vulnerable and, like, just take all the layers off and just do it.
That's funny you say that, though, because I find it quite hard to be vulnerable out of drag. So it's funny that, like, putting all this makeup on and the wig and the thing gives me the license to feel very vulnerable.
Totally.
Like,
and I saw that in you when I first worked with you. Because we were working in rehearsal rooms in just you.
Yeah.
And then when we moved and you started to get into costume and then we started to like tech Soho, and I was like, oh, okay.
This colour really reminds me of my mum, just like coppery. So, you know? so much of drag aesthetic does come from the Arab world. The most like real and connected and present I ever feel is on stage, like performing in front of even like 1,000 people doing something as transgressive as Quran to Queen feels less scary than just like going on a walk
Right.
with a guy and trying to be honest
Yeah.
and like real, and it's
Totally.
like it's like drag for me is like the way to access all the trauma because you can also do it in a fun way and you're in charge of it. But I sometimes feel quite scared that I'm like, oh God, I love how I felt on stage. I wish I could feel like that all the time.
Right. And it's a process, and you eventually will, because you get into this costume every time, and you strip naked both figuratively and literally.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? And it's just it is a process, and for you, honestly, and I'm not just saying that, but like I've seen it with you, and you just go up and up and up.
Oh, thank you.
Genuinely though, which is one of the beauties of working with you, is because there's always just another sort of leap that you take where you get into an entirely new and brilliant world of the show.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I love to see it happen, yeah, totally.
Well, you've been an amazing director. So previous to Safe, I only worked with, I was mostly working with white directors,
Right.
which was, some of them were great.
Yeah.
But I definitely noticed the importance of actually collaborating with other queer. I'm usually only queer Arab in the room, this being the UK and some of the institutions that I've had to work and write for. And what I found amazing for me was I didn't have to explain anything that I would usually have to explain. Like, there wasn't, well, why I'm saying this is this. It's like you understood the shorthand completely of, which meant that we could get into the detail as much as possible, rather than like, I think we need to explain to the audience like what being non-binary is or what this, because there's that expectation of I need to understand it.
Right.
Whereas with you, because obviously you just understand it and it's your world as well. We didn't have to think about any of that. We could just go right into the detail.
Which saved us a lot of time.
Which saves us a lot of time. It also means I think the work is more textured and more detailed because it's not doing a paint by numbers. This is what queer Islamic identity is.
Totally.
It's like we both know.
Yeah.
And one thing I find about our show, this was your idea. A whole minute lip syncing in Arabic, a lot of Arabic text, a lot of bits that aren't 100% accessible to the audience, which was scared me at first.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, put it in English so they understand. But that's been really empowering because it's like, you just need to come into my reality.
Exactly. And I think owning that reality, which you 100% do, is what makes the show really special and is what makes people really, really like it. It's because it's just you. And even if there are bits in there that they can't access or bits in there that they don't understand, it still is great and it still is entertaining, educational and just truthful. And I've worked with, Arab and North African artists in the UK, in the US, in Europe, and I've directed and produced, and in all of these different places, I've worked with artists where like they would be referred to as like, oh, your work is not very accessible because like I've worked with a show entirely in Arabic with like really bad subtitling, and it's some of these shows are actually really special because again it's theatre versus TV, and like, I'm not going to ask you like sit down and watch like a Russian film or a translation, but if you do it live and you're present,
you feel something,
and even if there are subtitles, sometimes you just don't want to look at them and you just want to watch what's happening, and I think that is what I wanted to do with you, is because obviously your fears, or rather not fears, but concerns about these things are valid and understandable. But yeah, like you said, it's just 1 hour, me, my world, you like me because you paid to come see me, so it is what it is.
More glue.
I need more glue. I need more glue. Really reminds me of my mum all this, I have to say. She spent hours doing her makeup when I was a kid. I just used to be obsessed with her. shameless conservative Muslim woman taught her son how to do drag without realizing. Because we're talking candidly here, like, I'm sure it has been frustrating to work with me every now and then.
I mean,
Because I worry too much if people will like it.
of course. No, because I understand it.
Mhm.
Everyone has worries. Everyone has anxieties. I think it's just, it took a little bit of sort of, I guess, empowerment with you to just be like, no, it's fine, you can do it.
And you know, the audience don't laugh for 30 seconds and I'm like, tell a joke.
Yeah.
I'm just so used to performing
Yeah, yeah.
to white little audiences
Totally.
that I'm like, I'm a crazy person. You know,
Yeah, please be entertained. Yeah, I know.
Whereas like
I know.
now more and more I'm just like,
Yeah.
this is supposed to be silent.
Yeah.
And if you feel uncomfortable, good.
Of course, and it was also really difficult for me because like I understand the nature of drag, and drag is drag. Like drag is not a bedtime story, and it's not, you know, like let's bring out the violins, darling. It's not that, but I think that there is room in drag for that.
I know it's much more than just,
You know,
it comes from a dark place.
of course, like when you watch like great drag, and you see this person, you know, self-deprecating humor, and all of these sort of like incredible
Self-loathing in a funny way.
yeah, and you know that underneath there is a human being with all kinds of emotions, and they're using this as a platform to communicate that to you.
Right.
So with you, there were so many beautiful moments in the show where like, I don't care if people don't laugh. I don't even
Because we
care.
gave them so much already.
Yeah, and I don't even care if they're bored to death, to be honest, because you're saying something that is true to you
Mm.
and is really special. And it's exactly why you're doing the whole show, because you have a lot to say. And it's exactly why you wrote the damn book, because you have a lot to
Yeah.
say. You
It's
know?
different writing the book, you know, it's, when there's an audience there, there's that pressure to entertain.
Yeah.
But I'm letting go of that more and more, and I think that actually makes it more entertaining.
Right.
Because if someone's constantly self-deprecating themselves, like it gets old.
Yeah, of course.
But it's interesting because like it is a drag show, and a lot of people who saw the show last week were like, it is a drag show, but it didn't feel like drag. And I think people assume that drag is just going to be, you know, a bit of lip syncing.
Thank you, RuPaul.
You know, and all that, but actually it's like, the reason I'm in drag right now is it's coming from a place of trauma.
Yeah.
And also identifying with bits of the Aragog,
Yeah.
you know, the feminine bits and all
Yeah.
that. So people really were surprised by that. I'm
Mhm.
like, you need to probably decolonize your idea of drag. Actually.
Exactly,
Because, like,
exactly.
this is about accessing something quite.
Mhm. And all the elements that we've put in there with the video and the sound and projections and stuff like that, it's to say, well, not only to say it's a proper show, but it is a proper show, and it's not just you paying a ticket to like, you know,
Laugh about anal for an hour.
down, yeah, laugh about anal for an hour, down 10 pints and be like, ha ha ha, and go home.
Mhm.
Even though that's fun too.
Yeah.
But I didn't want it to be that kind of show, and I think you
I think people assume at the beginning because there's so many gags at the
Of
beginning
course.
it's going to be that by the
Yeah.
end of it. But it's interesting. Audience expectation for a drag show is something I've been really feeling performing this.
Mhm.
They're like, haha, I'm laughing, but wait, what?
Yeah.
Blush time. Ooh, you're making me blush, director. Show me your willy. I love blush. I feel I look like a toucan. Do you know what I mean? So I've been living in the UK since I was 11. And you came here 2 years ago?
Yeah, so I came in sort of like late 2017. I was in Glasgow for like a year, and then I moved to London. I was in London in 2011 to 2012. I was studying here, and then I went back, and then I went back again. So yeah, almost 2 years.
How have you found navigating the arts in Britain as a career?
I mean, look, the arts are difficult, and everyone knows that, but there's a lot of sort of politics that are attached to making theatre in the UK that I'm not about. Especially because like making work in other parts of the world, and you see how you can make work in other parts of the world without having to deal with these kind of politics.
And the UK liberal arts haven't, I mean this is true of Britain, but British liberals in general. but
Yeah.
The liberal arts still don't believe that it's racist. You know, liberal arts
Yeah.
like, oh yay, actually
We're inclusive.
we're
like,
inclusive because we had a diversity scheme we're already paying you 50 quid to come and talk about inclusion. or whatever.
Basically.
But because UK fundamentally doesn't understand colonialism,
Mhm.
because it doesn't get taught,
Mm-hmm.
people just don't know about it.
Starts in education for
And
sure.
my friends in Berlin, and I know you've worked there as well, they're like, their theatre is generally much more progressive, but they've dealt with their past trauma.
Literally.
They know how it
Literally.
works.
Yeah.
Whereas in the UK, people are like, there's nothing wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely see that in the liberal arts. Like, if I pitch a TV show that's like quite out there, someone's like, oh god, that's a bit spicy.
Mm.
Like, it doesn't feel UK to me. It's like, what do you know?
Yeah.
I feel like that's the main thing I fight in this country. Is
Right.
convincing people that racism is
It's
part of everyday
yeah.
life.
it's a journey, and sometimes you just like want to quit it and like pack up and leave because you're not really, you know, you're no longer willing to sit down with someone and then just like be like, oh no, you moved from Egypt, but your English is so good. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just like,
I know what
please,
you're
let's
saying.
move on. We've got 30 minutes to go grab a coffee and perhaps you giving me a job. So like, can we not discuss that?
Yeah.
And then it's stuff like, yeah, but like, can you work on a piece? Like, can you work on Shakespeare? I was like, first of all, yes, I can. Second of all, fuck Shakespeare.
Mm.
So it's just like,
And also, my experiences might inform Shakespeare in a way that you don't understand yet, like, because it's just a different perspective.
exactly.
I always say this to people that like so I mean I mostly write for TV, and I had a lot of trouble getting a show made, which was a comedy about an Arab drag queen living with their mother, which you've watched a bit of, read a bit of, and their mother is more of a drag queen than they are, even though she's like really homophobic. And one constant feedback I got was from white commissioners was, "Where's needs more trauma?" Or
It's
their idea of what a queer Arab story would be like. And I was like, but this is supposed to be intentionally hilarious and surprising because it's the truth really of my mum, who's not this crazy abuser. She's can be horrible sometimes, but she's hilarious as a character, and that's who Glamour is. I love this. I've got really into doing brown lips. I feel like it's like I've been rimming someone the whole time. It reminds me of my mum. My mum used to do such, and she always put a beauty spot as well.
it's funny because like when you said like, oh, we want more trauma, and like I've seen a lot of work here, and you know, it almost worked on work that was basically trauma pornography. And it's just like a display of like, everyone please sit down and like let's cry together.
And also like absolve yourself of your white guilt by watching this.
You know?
People want 12 years a slave.
Yeah.
Of everything.
Of everything.
Because then they're like...
Yeah, literally. So it's just like, no, I want empowered characters, and I want truth, and I want the reality of it. I get like I'm a bit careful around the word of representation because it can be overused and then it gets diluted and like no one understands what it really means. I do want to see representation, and I want to see more queer Arabs and more queer black and brown people on camera and on stage, but sometimes it's just like it's not the ultimate priority, but I'd love to see it. Because do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because I feel like there's a difference between, and this is where I think everyone gets it wrong, what kind of white liberal space is like. It's like, oh yeah, we had a sketch group that had all people of colour, ooh, diversity done, and I'm like, but that sketch
exactly
group was exactly like every other sketch group.
That's exactly what I mean.
You've not diversified the type of content.
Exactly, and this is why I'm like, well, you can scream representation all you want, but it's still not really there.
Unless you start to have decision makers and shows. I always say to like commissioners always ask me like, what can we do? I'm like, you should probably commission something you don't really like. I always say that to TV commissioners because it's like, you only want to commission things that you think are good, but what you think is good is by what came before it, and it's just the same old thing. So why don't you, okay, this work by piece of colour, I didn't fully, person of colour, I didn't understand fully, or made me feel uncomfortable. See what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
If people don't like it, it's one show and discussion.
Totally. And I think there's a fear there, why they don't want to put it on, whatever.
Alienate people, is it accessible, blah, blah, blah.
All of these like lists of fears that are entirely invalid. But you just have to like laugh about them because what else are you gonna do?
I find putting on lipstick oddly sensual. It's like,
Yeah.
it's just so like, The only problem about being in drag is you feel so sexy, but yet you can't do anything. Because if I went to kiss someone, it would literally be like brown shit all over their face. It would literally look like they did blackface. Thanks, guys. How am I single? Wow. You can watch Glamour from Quran to Queen. You can keep updated on my website, amralqadi.com. If you can't work out the spelling, it's somewhere online, but it's not alqaida.com. And we're going to continue touring it for a couple of years, I hope. Saif Abdul Salam is a wonderful director. Lots of fun. And then the pounding got so hard that the room became a kind of mosque. And the speakers playing a remix of Lady Gaga's Bad Romance became the Islamic call to prayer. And it was as if I was having a love duet with my ex, as if Allah was at the chemsex party with me. Allah Akbar. I want your ugly, I want your disease, I want your everything as long as it's free. I want your love, 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 I want your love. I want your drama, the touch of your hand. I want your leather-studded kiss in the sand. I want your love, 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 love. I want your love. I want your love and I want your revenge. You and me could write a bad romance. I want your love and I want your revenge. You and me could write a bad romance. Allah Akbar. I want your love and I want your revenge. I want your love. I don't wanna be friends. Je veux ton amour et je veux ton revanche. Je veux ton amour. I don't wanna be friends. I don't wanna be friends. I don't wanna be friends. Want your better romance.
Yeah.
Drunk it, drunk it, drunk it.
Yeah.
I want your love and I want your revenge. You and me could write a bad romance. I want your love and I want your revenge. You and me could write a bad romance. Allah Akbar. Rock, 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 glamour, la, la, la. Allah Akbar. Want your better romance.
Ra ra Roma Roma ma ga ga ooh la la what's your bad romance?
You and me could write a bad romance.
Let's not do that.